My 13-year-old daughter called this morning at about 8 o'clock on her way to school, and she was very disturbed and distraught because she heard something on the radio that I'd like to play right now.
It says organic and natural and green, but the people behind the product are anything but. Now the same thing is happening in our West County election for Supervisor this November. Lynda Hopkins is packaging herself to voters as an organic farmer, but look behind the label to see who's bankrolling her campaign. Gravel miners that degraded our Russian River, real estate developers that turn our green space into sprawl, and big agricultural corporations that drain our water supply and spread toxic chemicals. That's the sound of Lynda Hopkins, taking our county backward to the days when developers and big business interests controlled our Board of Supervisors. On November 8th, stand up to developers and big corporations. Don't let Lynda Hopkins take West County backward. Paid for by Coalition for a Better Sonoma County, supporting Noreen Evans for Supervisor 2016. Sponsored by environmental, community, and labor organizations. This advertisement was not authorized or paid for by a candidate for this office or...
Okay, that's a minute. It's 59 seconds. I have a minute. So I'd like to ask both candidates, how do you feel about hit pieces like that? I'm filing a complaint with the Fair Political Practices Committee tomorrow.
This is the first I've heard of it. I haven't heard it on the radio. Well, sir, you can scoff all you want, but it happens to be true. And as I said before, I have all of the campaign contributions listed on my website. If you'd like to look at it, you can. Now, I think what Tom or you was saying, will you denounce that? Of course, I don't like hit pieces. And that's not something I authorized, condoned, or knew anything about. But let me mention something. If this campaign goes the way that it has historically in every other supervisor race in this county for the last 10 to 15 years, we will expect to see a hugely well-funded hit piece against me. And that's just a reality. And if it goes the way that it has in the past, it will be funded by the the California Real Estate Political Action Committee, the Sonoma County Alliance Political Action Committee, the North Bay Builders Exchange, and a group called North Coast Citizens for a Better Economy. And possibly the Garbage Man, yes, right. And the reason we know this is because these contributions and expenditures are required to be reported. By California law, they're required to be reported. So we've seen this in the past. And if this goes the way that is expected, then these are all of Lynda Hopkins supporters. So I would be happy for us both to say, we denounce this kind of campaigning. I don't like it. As I mentioned before, I'm happy to give you the information. I trust you with the information. I know you are informed voters, and you'll make the right decision. That's what elections are all about. It's up to you. You need the information. You've got the information. But for negative campaigning, I don't like that kind of thing. And certainly, and I denounce it now. I denounce it now. But let me explain something. An independent expenditure, and this applies to Lynda as well, is not something that the candidates can influence. All we can do is say we don't like it. Now, this is the first I have heard of it. Thanks for springing it on me, Tom. Appreciate that. Well, you know, so this is the first I've heard of it. Hadn't heard of it before, but I'm happy to denounce it, and I'd invite Lynda to do the same.
I find it very ironic that my opponent is denouncing this behavior when she has in fact engaged in this type of behavior ever since the primary. And you have actually distributed flyers that purposefully misrepresented my positions and were left on doors that I was knocking on. I actually have a video on Facebook about it where I sort of take down the 4 myths that she is dispelling. And when we're talking about, sort of negative campaigning, we have 3 rules for our volunteers. Number 1, don't leave flyers on mailboxes. That's illegal. Number 2, don't ring doorbells of people who say no soliciting. They'll be pissed off at you. Number 3, no negativity. If someone brings up something about the other candidate, you respond with positivity about our campaign. You do not ever go after the other candidate. And yet my opponent was distributing flyers that stated that I oppose rent control, that I am bankrolled by gravel miners, and that, which I thought was very ironic, that I moved into the district last year. We have never, ever discussed anything like that, with respect to your campaign, and yet you were going after me for having lived in the district 6 months longer than you have, and I moved down the road from my farm. So, that kind of just sort of negative misinformation is not what my campaign has stood for, and I find it actually actually really just kind of, gutter. It's like, why do we want to roll around in the mud? So I absolutely denounce negative campaigning. And, the only attack that I have ever made on her campaign is an attack on the attack on me, where it was sort of, I feel like 2 negatives make a positive in math, right? And it was like, at some point you've got to stand up and say, you know what, this is not accurate. This is not right. We deserve a civil discourse in West County. So I absolutely denounce IEs. But when we're talking about the IEs, I've already had $90,000 spent against me in the primary. There was $90,000 independent expenditure committee that went out in support of Noreen and against me. So while there may be a campaign brewing against you, I don't know about that, but the ones that have been against me are real, and you have actually distributed them. So, there's a ton of misinformation out there. And I would really encourage you to, again, just come and ask me about it. There are no secrets. There is nothing to hide. I am running because I love this community and I want to serve this community. And I am happy to answer whatever tough questions you want to throw at me. Hold my feet to the fire. That's what this is about. But you know what? Let's keep it clean. Let's talk about the issues. There's so many problems in this community. Why are we sort of wasting time throwing mud about who lived where when we could be focused on solving homelessness? When we could be focused on how do we reinvent local government to fix these problems that have been around for the last 30 or 40 years? So I would just encourage you all to, pick up the phone, call me, to write letters to the editor based on policy, not nasty attacks, and to get engaged, because, that's the way that we can really come together and get things done as a community.
Political material has something that's by law has to be approved by the candidate. So if you hear something or you see something and it has not been approved by the candidate, there has to be a statement. Am I correct about this?
Right.
There has to be a statement that says this has been approved by the candidate. And if it's not approved by the candidate, don't take it seriously.
So let's talk about cleaning it up, because the only accusations that have been thrown about in this campaign, the only name calling that has happened, the only excrement flinging that has happened was in a really, really terrible video that was created by Ms. Hopkins. Well, you can.
Thank you.
Again, you may have your own opinions, and I trust you to draw your own opinions. But when somebody calls me a liar, I tend to take a little bit exception to that. And again, the reason I was called a liar is because I dared to point out the vast amount of money that is coming from the wine industry and the development industry into Ms. Hopkins' campaign. And I have a flyer over there that documents it. It's all on my website. Take a look at it. But the other part of this is, and again, you may have your own opinion, I don't think it's quite appropriate for somebody who wants to be your representative to use that kind of language in public. Now, as I mentioned, I have represented you for 20 years. I have never been heard to say things like that in public. I was raised by a US Marine. I'm no stranger to salty language. But I don't think that's appropriate. Call me old school. You won't hear that kind of language coming out of my mouth when I'm representing you.
I would just like to note that the 4-letter word was bleeped out for people like myself who have small kids and might have been playing it on their iPhone around their children. And that also we don't live in a Jane Austen novel. I think we're all adults here. At the end of the day, I find mudslinging far more offensive than 4-letter words. And that was the whole point of the video. And so I would encourage you all to watch it. It is not sort of, I think she described it as a bizarre, profane, it's not that. It was, has everyone watched, Jon Stewart, The Daily Show? That was sort of the model for the video. So I would encourage you all to go out and watch it. It's only a few minutes and enjoy that. So.